This is the My Writing Diary podcast. I'm Bill Wong. Last week I talked about finishing my manuscript and the major themes addressed. This week I'll talk about my goals, aspirations, and my process. First of all, I wanted to talk about hope in this desperate world. There's many things that are terrible things that are happening, and I wanted to give people hope. However, before putting out the fire engulfs and destroys things. Hope is the fire being put out and rebuilding. My goal was to give hope. Through most of the book, there doesn't seem like a lot of hope. I talk about a lot of very dark things happening. Even though this is taking place in the year 2000, many of the themes today I talk about in my historical fiction. First of all, the protagonist is a woman. I wanted to embrace a female character because many times male is the main character. The main tag word I discovered while writing this book was, too often we look away. And I wrote this about 1/3 or halfway into the novel, and I realized this is the most important few words, that too often we look away, and if we look away, we can't see that there's a problem. If we can't see that there's a problem, we can't experience it. If we can't experience it, we can't have a voice to make a change, and then we have to have courage to say something. And too often we look away. And when I completed that line, it was, too often we look away to appease the lesser demons of our nature. But it played with some of the words from Abraham Lincoln. Those few words are the most important words in the book because too often we look away. And if we can't look at something, truly look at something, we can't change it. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about my process, which is unique for me. Everyone has to have their own process. Whenever I teach pickleball, I realize that what works for me doesn't necessarily work for my student. I have a different body type, I have different experiences, I have different natural abilities. I have to tailor my instruction to that individual. I have to plan things. I have to plan my book out. When I started this novel, I looked at the 3-act structure and the hero's journey and combined them together. And each main plot point that I wanted to hit, I wrote in. When I was doing the planning, I would look at the 3-act structure, the hero's journey, and I would combine them. This is a plot point I wanted, or this is something I wanted to say, and this was something I wanted to happen to the main character. These are the influences. Here are the implications and the consequences. I tied them all together in a spreadsheet. Then each character, I had to have a firm understanding of who they are. Everything from what they eat to if they're allergic to something. And I watched people. And I'm sure a lot of authors do that. They watch individuals, how they say things, what they do. Many times when I see something interesting, I put it in the book. And that's exactly what I did. Before I started writing one word of this book, I had to research. And one of my goals was to better understand the Middle East because I had no understanding of even where Jordan was in relation to Israel, where Syria was, what the capital of Syria was, how many million people were in Syria, and the relationships with some of the superpowers that each one of these countries had. And there's a distrust between the Jordanians and the Syrians because at one point in their history in the 70s, Syria tried to overthrow the Jordanian government. There's a distrust, and I had to put that in the novel to make it believable. I had to do a lot of research. I read some books from former CIA agents, former CIA directors, military people. I had to learn many things, especially about the military, the command structure, the ranks, the size of a battalion versus a brigade, what level of officer commands a brigade. I did not know that. I didn't even know the difference between an E3 and an O5. I had to learn that because I'm not ex-military. This took a lot of time. I had to do a lot of research. And I got little tidbits of things that were interesting. Then I tried to use a framework from a prior Israeli war for this novel, but I had to change it. I am a planner, and every single part of the novel I planned. As I started the writing process, and I realized a scene needs to be put in here, or another chapter, or this is not clear, or why would this individual or this character do this thing if this other thing did not happen? I had to go into backstory. One of the things that helped me write this fiction novel was writing a nonfiction book, because I had to learn about organization and putting things in a framework which made sense. Then writing the poetry, I was able to throw out some of the grammatics that were needed in a novel and play with things. When I wrote the novel, I didn't understand the difference between scenes and chapters and plot points. And that's something I needed to learn. And also how to demonstrate what a character is thinking. There was a lot to learn. Today, I talked about my process. Now I'm going to talk about some of my characters. And the most interesting characters are always the villains. Since I was little, I always enjoyed studying World War II. And I believe Adolf Hitler is the most terrible villain to ever walk on our planet, at least in the 20th century. I analyzed the dictator, the fascist, and broke Adolf Hitler's persona into 4 different villains, maybe 5 different villains. First of all, I'll do it in order of the individuals appearing in the novel. I wanted to create terrifying characters. I thought having a 22-year-old in charge of the Syrian army would be a terrifying thought. I created a situation where the new president of Syria, who's in charge of an army, more than 200,000 soldiers and about 2,000 tanks, would be terrifying. On the one hand, he has youth, he's creative, and he's intelligent. However, he's impulsive. And he didn't have the discipline that many older leaders have. A terrifying thought. Secondly, I wanted to create other characters, such as the Israeli Prime Minister. I am making political commentary about today in my historical fiction. Themes are very important to me, and trying to learn lessons are very important to me. The name of the Syrian Prime Minister is Yusuf Mustafa. The name of the Israeli Prime Minister is Benjamin Cohen. On the one hand, he's also very intelligent. He desires and needs power more than anything. And he's slightly self-indulgent. And I wanted to show some of his indulgence by him having affairs and him doing reckless things, even though he's very intelligent. And having the power is so important to him that he will do anything to retain that power. That is also a very scary thought. Many politicians in today's world, they will do anything to retain power, which is, to me, terrifying. The third villain is the Egyptian president. He, on the other hand, is slightly fearful and very prideful and has a very large ego. And he is slightly self-indulgent. At the beginning, he wanted to do right for his people, the Egyptian people. However, the power has corrupted him. So he goes by the fear of losing that power. The fourth individual is a leader in Hamas. And I wanted to make somebody who's very charismatic. A lot of leaders today are very charismatic. People want to follow them. People want to do what they tell them to do. And there's a charisma in how they speak, how they move. We see that in religious leaders. They're demigods. They're demigods. I made this individual also very intelligent, however more streetwise, and a charisma of how he says things to get people to do what he wants. The fifth villain is a colonel in Israeli intelligence. His name is Rabin. I see him as someone who is middle management, who just is there, is afraid to make decisions, is afraid to take a stance because it's easier to do nothing than to make a decision. I was watching the movie Band of Brothers the other day, and there was a lieutenant. His name was Lieutenant Dyke. He was very good at sounding like he knew what he was doing, sounding like he was making decisions, sounding like he was in charge, but he never did anything. He was afraid. Colonel Rabin is the same way, where he's afraid to make a decision because he didn't want to make a mistake. And there was cowardice in him. Unfortunately, there's a lot of individuals in middle management like that. And the final person is the principal of the school of the main character. She represents institutionalization and bureaucracy. When you try to do things and change the world, they are standing in your way. It's their way or the highway, and you do it our way or you are out. And there's individuals in position of leadership who stop you from making changes because they are the institutions to prevent change. I wanted to talk about all those 4 or 5 characters, which represents one individual, and put them in my book. Now the heroes. The main character, the protagonist, is a woman, a 25-year-old, who is a female Mr. Rogers. And I thought it was very interesting to have someone who's very kind, who has a good soul, who wants to do the right thing, who volunteers at the UN against someone like an Adolf Hitler. I thought that was delicious to me. I love that thought, where a woman is against a man, someone who's kind against someone who is evil. I love that idea. A Fred Rogers against an Adolf Hitler. At the very beginning, she's very innocent, and she has to make a choice to use violence, even though she is very religious and spiritual. Then she has to make a decision to kill someone in order to save her friends. She has to make a decision to order an airstrike to save her country. And she has to make sacrifices. I love this. The terrible things I put this woman through. It made me cry very often. And her love interest is a Palestinian. He represents innocence and courage and a good heart. Unfortunately, he is someone who gets destroyed and churned up by the bureaucracy and the institutions, and being a Palestinian who is a 3rd or 4th class citizen. That is the way the world is. The other heroes I wanted to represent were education, media, healthcare workers, and local governments. And throughout the novel, at the very beginning of the novel, when there is a bombing, a local mayor and a reporter is killed. I wanted to say, these are the people who are running the government, helping individuals, or media who are doing their job to inform the public. They are also collateral damage. And healthcare workers during the pandemic, they basically saved the world, and the scientists saved the world. And I wanted to talk about those issues. In the back of the story, there's these little clues of things that I believe are important. In summary, I am a planner. Many of the themes I talked about last time, which is having courage, using your voice, making a change, and many times those individuals are destroyed by the institutions that are meant to protect us. This is the My Writing Diary podcast. I'm Bill Wong.